Enrichment, Enlightenment, Transformation. Rabbi Yisroel Cutler, the spiritual leader of Chabad of Cary, North Carolina, guides anyone who has been searching for a meaningful life and conscious living. Join our discussions about the mundane, our daily activities, and then infuse every day with a spiritual twist from the inspired sages of the Talmud and Jewish mysticism, which many call Kabbalah. We learn from the root source of all religious monotheistic traditions and delve into the symbolism and levels of meaning from biblical stories.
For joining us. Those coming here live, today's July 5th, 2016, the 29th day of the month of Sivan. And thank you to our online audience, anyone that is listening all over the world. We love that you are joining with us and want you to let us know that you're with us. So send your name, ask questions, participate in the conversation. In today's class, we're going to do a class that we skipped a few weeks ago. And when we skipped it, I got a few requests, both online as well as local. How come we skipped it? So it's a class about Gematria, which is something I quote all the time, numerical values. Where did it come from? Is there any truth to it? Can I make up my own Gematria, and that automatically means there's meaning if I tell you that Danny and Malka have the same numerical values, so obviously they're meant to get married to each other, right? No. How far do we take this, and why should there be truth to it? So it actually was a class from 3 weeks ago, and they connected it to the Torah portion 3 weeks ago, and I'm late. So it doesn't make sense to study 3 weeks ago. So I said, hey, Gematria is in every week's Parsha, right? So let's just go to the beginning of this week's Parsha, and we will find Gematrias over here as well. And then after we use this as the introduction, then we will afterwards go to the main discussion, the nature of Gematria. But in any single Torah portion, there will be dozens of numerical values, really. In every single Torah portion, there are dozens and dozens of, well, this has the same numerical value as this.
Therefore, they're
correct. And we usually don't study much about them. There is an entire commentary in Hal. I was always going to actually mention it because you're into Gematria now. And when you ask me a good thing to study, a certain commentary, you might actually enjoy this one because he goes through so many of the Torah portions. I mean, it's a running commentary of Gematrias.
Might be interesting for me, but for me to do services.
That wouldn't be, no. It would be, yeah. Gematria is very hard to explain. First of all, unless someone's sitting with a pen and pencil. Are they actually going to add up the numbers and believe you? You will. You know, sometimes you can just say this has the same numerical value as that, and people just accept it. But let's talk a little bit about why should there be a numerical value to the Torah? Where does that come from? Unfortunately, the books this week got left behind in Raleigh. So we're not going to be able to go around and read. I'm just going to share the teaching straight from my book over here. I apologize. Probably will be helpful for the online audience because now they're on the same page as everybody else. So do you mind sharing just a little handout? So let's begin. Oh, there's another one here. Good to see you. Let's begin. This is the opening of this week's Torah portion, and I use this just as an example of Gematria. But you could pick your favorite portion in the Torah, and I guarantee you there'll be dozens of these all over. Last week we discussed the spies. Remember we had a story with the Jews who were frightened to go into the land of Israel. We actually discussed tzitzit last week in the same Torah portion. Tzitzit, talus. We did that last week. And this week we have the story of Korach. Korach is a relative of Moses. He's a cousin of Moses. And he creates an uprising. And what's unique about this uprising is all the other complaining of the Jews in the wilderness was directed at God. This one is directed at Moses. So why don't we begin? And why don't you begin, Kimberly? This is the opening words of this week's Torah portion. Korach.
Korach, the son of Itzar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi, took himself to one side, along with Dathan and
Abiram,
the son of Eliab, and On, the son of Peleth, descendants of Reuben. They arose against Moses together with 250 men from the children of Israel, chieftains of the congregation, representatives of the assembly, men of repute. They assembled against Moses and Aaron and said to them, "You take too much upon yourselves, for the entire congregation are all holy, and the Lord is in their midst. So why do you raise yourselves above the Lord's assembly?" Moses heard and fell on his face.
It's the expression of despair. So he directs this on Moshe, and he says, "Why are you the leader?" And it wasn't just you're the leader. You appointed your brother as the high priest. Some serious, nepotism going on over here. So he accuses Moshe of being on a different level as everyone else. Now, what did he really want? When you just read this, what does it seem like he wants? What is he?
He wants more power for himself.
No, he wanted to serve Hashem too.
So it's when you just read it, it actually says it seems like he wants like no leader, everyone to be the same, But often in history, when people say that, really they want the position. You have that very, very often where you will have, why are you doing this? Everyone is really they want the position of leadership. And indeed, some of the commentaries say that he was upset about he felt he was slighted for one of the positions. But when you actually read the texts, it seems to say everyone should be the same in their relationship to God. We all heard God at Sinai. We all, fundamental to Judaism is that we have our own relationship with God. Why do we have this Moses character who's telling us that? Now, by doing this, he's essentially also arguing with God because he's thinking that Moses has made this all up, right? Yeah. Okay. So this is the beginning of Torah portion. He gets 250 people, and these were not nobodies. These were, good people. They were respected people. A lot of the commentators ask, why is he doing it particularly at this juncture? Aaron was appointed high priest much earlier. Why do you think?
What juncture are we at?
The Jews, last week they tried sending the spies to the land of Israel, and that mission failed, and right afterwards Korach comes. Why then? Especially because the Jews were just told what?
They're going to vulgar around.
For the desert for 40 years. So if there's ever a time for an uprising, right, the morale is very low knowing that they're going to be in the desert for 40 years.
That's a stiff punishment.
And they're not going to, this all was about them going to the promised land. Now they find out that it's not even, at least the men, they're not even going to be going. It's their children going. So that is the simple explanation. There are deeper explanations as well, but we'll leave it there. So this is the first couple verses. So if you look at this commentary, whose name is the Baal HaTurim. That is the name of this commentary. And he's called that because his main book was called the Torah, which I'll get to in a moment. So he has a running commentary on the Parsha that discusses numerical values. And really quickly, for those that are not familiar with this idea before, every single letter of the 8 alphabet, and you're just beginning the alphabet, Mazel Tov, has a number associated with it. Okay? Now, the letters that are sort of the same, bet and vet, are counted as they're the same letter. There's 2 different versions of that letter. There's a few examples of that. Pei and Fei, or Shin and Sin. Okay. So Aleph is 1, and Bet is 2. And then you skip to Gimel is 3. And you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. Once you get up to Yud, which is 10, the next number becomes 20. So it's not 11. If you want to say 11, what do? You say Yud and Aleph. You go back to the first one, Aleph.
So Kaf is 20.
Kaf is 20. And remember, Kaf, Chaf, and final Chaf are all treated the same, Pam. Okay?
Lamed is what?
30, and so on and so forth. So you have 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, until you get to the 20th letter of the alphabet, more or less. And the 20th letter is Kuf, which is 100. And at that point, you go 100, 200, 300, and 400. And that is the end. That is this system of Gematria. So every single word has a numerical value. You can see what your name is in numbers. Okay. So we're going to talk more about that in a moment, but that introduction is necessary. Before we learn examples of the Baal HaTurim, here are 3 examples of the beginning of the Parsha. I could have chosen from literally dozens. Jersey, why don't you read?
Samples from the teaching of the Baal HaTurim.
Yeah.
They arose against Moshe, the words, and they rose up in Gematria.
And Gematria is to cause division. So lachalok is in Hebrew. So vayakumu, the words they arose, in Hebrew it's they arose in front of Moshe. He says in numerical value that is the same thing as saying to cause division. In other words, why did they get up? Their number 1 goal was to cause discord, to cause divisiveness. They were looking to break people apart. You know, she's figuring it out. Okay, next. It says that he doesn't just pick anyone in the community. He picks Kriyei Ha'edah, the chosen or the representatives of the community. So the word Kriyei, representatives, this one's a little bit easier. Steffi, representatives, Kriyei Ha'edah, is spelled without a usual yud.
After the Reish.
Correct. It should be kuf reish al yud aleph yud, to allude to the fact that throughout this whole process they violate all of the 10 commandments. What letter is 10? Well, excuse me, yud. A yud is missing to allude to the fact that through this whole rebellion, they violate. Where did that come from? The letter is just misspelled, right? Where did that? That's what he tells us. Gets better. Moshe hears and he falls on his face. And I really should have brought the Hebrew here. You know what?
Wait.
Pam, do you mind behind there? I think the Baal HaTurim might be in the orange chumash over there, if you don't mind.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it has the Baal HaTurim. Does it? I don't know. In Hebrew, at least. It does not. In any event. So get ready for this one. Moshe hears and he falls on his face. That's the same gematria as they accuse him of having adultery. What? Where did that? Korach. No, Korach accused Moshe of having adultery, meaning out of all the other accusations he's doing against Moshe, he throws into the mix.
He's also
All right, so what?
He's also an adult.
He's also an adult. Okay. I give this as an example, not to speak about each one of these 3, but this is typical Baal HaTurim, where the Torah portion is saying one thing, and he is saying the words themselves are alluding to other ideas. Why? Because they share the numerical value with other words. And, to someone who's just first learning about this seems absolutely ridiculous. It would be like opening up a book. And
like
it's opening up a book, and, it says in this book, apple, and apple is 72, and that's the same as or what is the meaning of this? So it's something you will hear often, Gematria. So it's worthwhile to have a class about this. Let me explain that these 3 ideas are not new ideas. The Medrash mentions each one of these. Okay, I just want to. Okay, it is the Midrash. There's an oral tradition about Korach making this accusation that Moshe has had an affair. What the Baal HaTurim did is he found in the words how it also has that. And I just want to pause on this last one.
And in the Midrash, the Midrash story did not come from Gematria.
No.
And so it's 2 different ways to it's like reinforcing the idea.
Good, and we're going to talk about reinforcing that idea in a moment. That's interesting. Where did the 10 Commandments come from? I don't know. I know the 3rd one is found in the Midrash. I need to research if the 2nd one is found anywhere, or is that the Baal HaTurim's own?
But it says that they broke the 10 Commandments.
Correct.
All of them.
So how in the story did he do all of that? He definitely gossiped and he called divisiveness, but where did he murder and where did?
Yeah.
Okay, so we need to study. We could study each one. The goal of today's class is not to discuss these 3.
Right.
But I use this as an introduction just to get everyone like, whoa, this is interesting. I do want to mention the third one for a moment, just parenthetically. The third one, he accuses him of having a adultery. I told you this is an idea from where? A midrash. A midrash is a oral tradition that relates to the narratives in the Torah, but it's not always meant to be taken literally. There's a message in a midrash. So there's a beautiful Hasidic perspective on this third one. He accused Moshe of having a relationship. The way it words it specifically is another married woman. Now let me explain what that means. What was Korach's complaint? Why are you, Moshe? What?
Above us all.
Above us all. Didn't we all hear God at Sinai? Okay. We know from Song of Songs and many other places that the relationship between us and God is synonymous with a bride and a groom. That is the relationship we have throughout Torah, is we are God's bride, so to speak. That is a metaphor used throughout Torah. When we do a mitzvah, we speak about being betrothed to God. So what's Korach saying to Moshe?
Following another God.
Every single Jew, every single one of us has our own relationship with God. What are you doing getting in the way? What are you doing getting in the way? So this is a Hasidic perspective on this midrash. The whole beauty of Judaism is that we do not need an intermediary. We do not need someone to connect us to God. There's us, and we have our own relationship with God. Why are you having your special, this is the way the Hasidic spin on this midrash. Now it's interesting what
You could also look at it, the adultery, that he's coming between Shekinah and Tefer, the queen and the king, by having a relationship with the queen.
Beautiful. Exactly. So I think the same thing need not be taken literally, but it has many different ways of looking at it. What would be the answer to that? The answer to that would be you misunderstand what the function of a Moshe is, or for that matter, what a Jewish leader is, or for that matter, in Hasidic tradition, we'd say what a Rebbe is. A Rebbe's job is not to get in between someone and God. It's to get behind someone and help shove them forward to have their own relationship with God. You see what I'm saying? We don't believe in intermediaries. Every person prays to God directly in Judaism.
The rabbi can't
So
do
no,
the
the rabbi.
mitzvahs for
But
him.
what can the rabbi help do? Not the rabbi. Anyone help remove some of the schmutz that might be getting in the way, and help accommodate, help facilitate you to have your own relationship with God. You see, so that would be an area in which misunderstanding the role of yes.
But in Moses' era,
Correct.
Moses was getting messages from God, and some of them were being passed on to the people appropriately. So he actually was
Correct.
acting in some ways as an intermediary, although from God directly.
Correct. Exactly. And what better example than Vayidaber Adonai El Moshe Lemor? God told Moshe to tell the Jewish people.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Many times.
That's yeah. So we could again. I just use this as an example. Will be an interesting class. Actually, the role of a rebbe, that would be another good class to have. We're gonna go back to
But
Yeah.
what you've said before also, like God only spoke to Moses with that clarity.
correct.
Later it was being
Correct.
et cetera with people, and so
Mhm.
he had a unique clarity granted to him.
But as far as the Jews on their end, their relationship to God did not have to go through Moshe. Okay, so that is examples of 3 of Gematrias. Let us now get into the whole. I'll go the why, the where, the why, and the who of Gematria. Who means who can make up these things. Where does this come from? And why should it work? Why should there be any meaning whatsoever in the numerical value of words? So here's where I wish we all had the books, but we do not. And I'll read some of these out loud. Nachmanides, who's one of the medieval commentaries, gives us this introduction. And he says, all of the oral tradition that was given to Moshe is alluded to through Gematria. Okay. In other words, there are truths. It's not that Gematria creates the truth. It is that Gematria reflects a truth. You see the difference? It's not that because this has the same numerical value, therefore. It's that there's a truth over here. That truth is reflected in the fact that they share the same gematria. We know that the Torah, when you read the Torah, it can be interpreted in many, many ways. I think you can read the regular storyline, and that's a story that happened at one point in history, or it's a law, or it's a mitzvah. Okay. Who here is familiar? Just raise a hand with the 4 dimensions in which the Torah is interpreted. 4. Okay, so this is good. Pshat, Remesh, Durush, Sod.
Oh,
Okay.
yes.
Every pasuk, every verse in Torah has 4 different dimensions. Think of, not a good example, you watch a movie, everyone watch a movie, then they give you the 3D glasses. Same movie, but now everything is seen differently. So when we learn Torah, we can learn it. It says every verse has 4 dimensions. The first is called Pishat. Pishat means the literal meaning. Literal does not mean, when I say literal, maybe literal is wrong. Straightforward might be better. You know why I don't say literal? When it says eye for an eye, it's never meant to be taken literally.
But that's what it says.
No, but that's not pshat. Pshat would mean you pay financial compensation for what you injured. Even the pshat relies on some oral tradition. But it just means it is the straightforward way of understanding the verse. Sometimes, Pam, one needs commentary in order to do that. They're correct. So one of the foremost Jewish commentators that you always hear me quote, Rashi. Rashi's rule is his explanations are only there to help us with what? Pshat. Pshat means that there's something in the regular storyline that is bothering me, and I don't understand. So Rashi will not bring some wild Kabbalistic, some Kabbalistic. That's not Rashi. That's not what he's out to do. Neither will Rashi bring a gematria, unless what?
He quotes somebody else.
But even if he quotes someone else, he won't. He will only quote a gematria. There's a few examples, unless what? Somehow that is necessary for the pshat. So I'll give you an example from last week. It was in our class last week. What gematria do we have last week?
The number of windings on
The tzitzit. Last week we had a class about tzitzit. The verse says you should look at the tzitzit and be reminded of all of the mitzvot. There's an obvious question. What's the question? Why should looking at my tzitzit help me remember of my mitzvot? So that's one of the few times Rashi will actually use gematria. And he told us last week, if you remember from last week, whoever was here, that tzitzit has the gematria of what number? 600. And then you add what? The 8 strings and the 5 knots. All together it is 613. And how many mitzvot are there in the Torah? 613. That's an exception. Rashi usually doesn't do that. Why did Rashi only, because is a gematria pshat? No, it is not. But in a few cases, it's necessary to the basic understanding of a verse. But usually it's not. So pshat would be anytime we learn Chumash, we learn the Bible, and someone says, I don't understand what's going on here. What's going on here? And you explain what that is. What are you explaining? Pshat. Okay? So, if we say, what's really bothering Korach? Let's use that. The pshat might be
Moses is in charge.
exactly.
And either above everyone else or not me.
Exactly.
Like either of those could be straightforward.
Exactly. And that is, both of those would be pshat. You'll read many commentaries that will give a far more sophisticated version of Korach, and he has a far holier aspiration. That's not pshat.
Okay, and what's the next one?
Oh, so we're getting there. But I want to make sure and one of the problems I've noticed often is when we have classes, we'll jump around. So I don't understand it. Well, first, let's understand all of pshat. Then we'll see the Torah from this lens. But it's hard to go back and forth between lenses. So then we have the next one, which is called remez. Remez. And remez means allusion or hints. What's a it means a hint.
Remes is a hint.
Okay. And these are hints or allusions that the Torah is referring to something that is not explicitly stated inside of the verse.
Just,
What?
no, I can't.
And here would be where Gematria is. Okay? Gematria is in Remez. Remez is the verse is saying one thing, but alluding to a different idea. Pshat would be the basic storyline of this. Remez refers to a different idea. Then we have, I'm trying to think of I mean, they're all over. Now, the gematria I told you of tzitzit, that's not remez, that's pshat. But usually gematria will be examples of here, where he's talking about a different idea, right? Moshe heard they accused him of having a relationship with another married woman. That's a different idea. It's alluding to something else. It's saying this, it's alluding to something else. That would be remez. The third one is called drush. And this is usually, what word does drush sound like? Midrash. And usually it would be a interpretation. Homiletic is another one of the definitions. What does homiletic mean? Always. No, not the homiletic. That is the translation often. Can someone get me a definition of homiletic?
Homily, it's a story of that facilitates the understanding.
Very good. It's a right. This is a metaphor. This is there's a moral lesson that should be learned out of this. Okay, that would be drush. Lidrosh, we search out a deeper meaning to teach us a lesson. And that would be drush. And then the last one.
Homiletic really is a word that has to do with chemicals.
Really?
Really?
No, with a hey, with the H.
H-O-L-Y-T-I-C.
H-O-M.
O-L-Y-T-I-C.
No, H-O-M-I-L-E.
H-O-M-I-L-E-T-I-C. L-E-T-I-C. And really, what would be a very good class would be one idea and explain that one on all the way through. That would be a very good way of doing it. So you take one idea, one pasuk, one verse, exactly,
And explain all four.
Exactly. So you're looking at the same thing. It's simply put, it means this, but it's also alluding to here. And the moral lesson from here is here. And what's the fourth one? What do you think it's going to be? Mystical, Kabbalistic. In Hebrew, the word is sod. Sod means secrets. It's alluding to a sod, S-O-D, sod. And that means a mystical plane, something that's spiritual, something very different. Sod is a completely different dimension. That would be Kabbalah. So whenever we're studying, it depends on what pair of glasses are we wearing. Are we looking to get the pshat from the story? Are we looking to get the sod from the story? Are we looking to get the remez from the story? So on and so forth.
Rabbi,
Now, yes.
could I ask a question?
Sure.
When these were written,
Mm.
were they written specifically to have 4 levels?
Good.
Or did 4 levels come about
No,
afterwards?
I like the question you're asked. Beautiful. The Torah is written. Think about, you're trying to take infinite ideas and convey it in a finite amount of words, right? So as such, the written Torah itself is finite in terms of how many words it is. So what do? You have layers, one layer on top of another layer, like DNA strands or something like that. So it's specifically worded in a way that has many deeper meanings.
So it's
Correct.
Purposely.
And that's why often people will ask, well, which one is it? Does it mean this or does it mean that? And that's an annoying question. When people are, Rabbi, this does it mean this or does it mean that? It's written in a way to allow for both or many. You see? I don't understand. This midrash says this and that says, no. That doesn't work. Now, especially when it comes to different midrashim, because when it comes to a midrash I told you is which dimension of the Torah? The third, the lesson. So when it comes to a midrash, it's about a lesson, all right? So one of the problems people have all the time is they will read a midrash and they will think that it is referring to what? Pshat. They'll read a midrash and they'll think it is pshat. They'll read a midrash and what? This is the storyline? That doesn't make any sense. That's such a crazy. It was never meant to be. Now it might be pshat, but that's not the point of it. So when you have a midrash that, even here, they accuse him of having a relationship with another woman, that doesn't mean in the storyline that's necessary. But it's this. There is a lesson there, and I gave you one possible lesson of that. Or if there is a midrash that says that Moses was 10 amot high. I don't know if you know this. There's a midrash that says Moshe, you know what an amma is? From here to here.
That would be tremendous.
That would be, yeah.
That'd be 10 feet. That's about a foot, isn't it?
It's a foot and a half. It'd be 15 foot. Yeah.
That'd be 10 cubits.
Oh, wait a minute. Do we see anywhere that he had to bend down? Is that, I mean, where? That is a midrash. It's not pshat. There's something about that. What does it mean that Moshe is 10 amot high? There is a moral...
Like larger than life.
He's larger than life. Mystically, he's complete in all of it. It's 10 to 10.
He's above the rest.
But when you can... So there's... Exactly. But and we can say what the meaning of that midrash is, and that's open... we can discuss that. But a lot of times people will read a midrash, and they'll think the goal is pshat. No, it's not. And it's that way with many midrashim. And then finally we have sod, and sod is the deeper meanings of it. So it's already 12:20. Okay. So let's now go a little bit further. And so here is when it comes to Gematria, it alludes to another idea. For instance, Jacob tells his sons when they're searching for Joseph, when they need food, they need food. And he says, go down over there to Egypt. Redu Sham. Go down, descend there. And the numerical value of Redu Shama is 210. Redu Shama. No, just Redu. Redu, thank you. Redu is 3 letters. Reish, Dalid, Vav. 200, 6, and 4. Altogether, 210. What's that alluding to? Guess what? You're going down to Egypt now just to look for food? Guess what's going to happen pretty soon? You're going to go down to Egypt for a long time. How long?
Is the word for slave 210?
It's not the word for slave, but that is the number of years that the Jews were in Egypt. 210 years. So it's alluding to the fact you think you're just going down for food right now, but this is the beginning of something much bigger. So he gives that example. This is Tesis Yontiv when he wants to explain the concept of Gematria. He says that. Now, where does the word Gematria come from? It's an odd word. So we have over here, it appears that the term is borrowed from Greek. And it's similar to the word like geometry.
Aha.
Our sages...
Wait, so gematria is not a Hebrew word?
No. It appears that this term is borrowed from the Greek language. It's a term that the sages used for numerical values. Our sages borrowed the term to refer to all matters of mathematics and numbers. They used the expression in Rabbinic Judaism, the word gematria, but it was borrowed from the Greek. So
does it mean that it started later, assigning the values?
So, no, that was just when they wanted to use a word for this phenomena, they used a word that was common at the time. Not that the truth began then, but that was when they wanted to give a word for it. That is the word that they used. And we see many examples. Here's a famous one, and then we're going to... So now, a famous one. The names of God. Okay, so we have the name of God that's best known. Well, we have 2 that are known very much, and that is the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey. We pronounce that today as Adonai, but that's not what it says. It says something much else. And then there's another name of God, Elohim. Okay. And we've had many classes over here where we discuss the differences between the 2 names. And it's a very important idea, not just because of Kabbalah, but because of Pshat. Why? Because there are many biblical critics that will say, sometimes it uses this word for God in the Torah, and sometimes it uses this word for God in the Torah. It must be that what?
Two authors.
Many authors, right. And at different points in history, they had a different name for God, and then multiple authors, and at a certain point in history, they all came together, And that would be so if you have the Torah appearing in front of us today, and as academics, we have to study it as we would study any ancient work that was buried in the ground. We would analyze different styles, different this, different that. In Judaism, though, we're not in the dark. We don't just have to analyze something like, how do we get from here to there? I don't know. We do know. We have a tradition. And in tradition, there's a difference between the name of God that is Yud He Vav He and the one that is Elohim. That when God conceals himself, when God becomes finite, so to speak, in terms of finite energy, when God limits his expression in the world, that is the name for Elohim. Restriction. The other name, Yud and He and Vav and He, is God revelation. So for instance, when the world is created, Bereshit bara Elohim. And throughout the whole Genesis story, which name of God is used? Elohim, Elohim, Elohim. Why? Because God created a world that hides his existence. Usually someone writes a book, their name is on the front, the author, right? The cover is gonna, right? Why didn't God make the world by God? And everyone, it's obvious that there's a God in the world. He didn't do it that way. He made us have to search out for him. Because the goal is that we have freedom of choice and we have to find this truth. Later, when it talks about the creation of mankind, for the first time, is that the first time we have Yud He Vav He? Right. So it also is strictness and mercy is another way of looking at the two names. All of a sudden, mankind is created in the image of God. Now we have the other name of God. And throughout the Torah, we use both names backwards and forward. We use different names different times, but there's meaning for it. Every time we make a blessing, which name of God do we use? Both. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, and then we finish the blessing. So there are different dimensions of God. So the name for God that is Elohim, I say Elohim, but it's really with the Hey, right? 86. That's the numerical value. It's 86, right? She's not believing me.
No,
yeah.
that's
It's
it's
good,
just I'm
Steffi.
picturing the long word and I'm saying 86.
Aleph is
Is
1.
one, yeah.
Lamed is 30. What do we have so far? 31. Hey, 5.
Five.
So what do we have?
36.
36. Yud, 10.
It's 46.
And then a mem at the end, which is 40. 86. Okay. And what's interesting is, there's another word in Hebrew, hateva. Hateva means the nature, the natural order of things. And it's also 86. Why? Because what is nature? Nature is a cycle of the way things run, seemingly on their own. You see a beautiful sunrise, sunset, what do you say? Mother Nature, right? It's when a rule of nature is broken, what do we say? That must be God, right? What, and the nature is not God. But because there's a repetition, because we see, forces that we have gotten used to, we say it's nature. Well, when God works through natural means, that's another way of God hiding himself. God creates a world, but uses these natural forces. But the natural forces are no more than instruments of God in the world, right? So the word for nature and Elohim are the same, because it is the same idea. Okay.
Another teaching, I believe it's from God created everything from nothingness.
Yeah.
I believe from nothingness is 87, one after God.
One after. Beautiful. Now, sometimes Gematria is confusing, and I want to give this as an example.
What was Adonai again?
Yud He Vav He is 26.
It's 26. And
That's different.
That's Adonai?
That's,
No?
you know what, I'll have to do it.
That's the Tetragrammaton.
Right.
Right.
We don't pronounce it. We pronounce it as
We don't
Adonai.
pronounce the
Yeah.
word.
Yeah.
Right. Although sometimes Adonai is spelled out
Correct.
in its natural form,
Correct.
which is another issue.
Yeah.
their teachings
So,
now.
but we're talking about Gematria here, so I want to say that not always is it simple Gematria. Sometimes there's different ways of doing Gematria. And what are the different ways of doing it? It's not just simply adding up the letters. Sometimes they'll do a step further. They'll actually spell out each letter. For instance, let's say I want to spell out the letter B, all right? Let's say B. So for each of the letters, they'll actually spell out what it is. So B would be BE. You see that? Let's say the word is bat, which means daughter. So instead of just saying bet and tough, you would spell out bet, which is probably bet tough, and then tough would spell out
Tough.
and many times you will see that method of gematria being used. For instance, the letter vav. What is the numerical value of vav?
6.
Correct. But sometimes vav is spelled out vav aleph vav. Yeah, there's a vav. The way it is in Hebrew is vav aleph vav, which together is 13. 13 is the same gematria as echad. 1. Because what is the function of the letter vav? What does vav mean in Hebrew? And. It brings things together, it makes things one. I'm using, if you missed that, that's okay, but there are different forms of gematria. Now, we have 4 minutes left. What is this all about? What is this all about? So, the first way of understanding it is, and I'll read this text from Nachmanides, is a tradition from our rabbis that certain gematrias were given to Moses to serve as a reminder for things that were verbally transmitted, whether matters of law or matters of tradition. In other words, so much of the Torah is oral tradition. And it's not, there's the written Torah, and then there's the oral Torah. But sometimes to help us out in remembering the oral tradition, what do? They made ideas, not they, God arranged that the words are written in a way where these ideas have the same numerical value. As you said, Brian, not that the numerical value shows they have a connection. They have a connection because those are truths that were given down from Sinai. But in order that they would be able to remember it better, they share numerical values. They are handles to the chest of Torah, it says over here. So this commentator, the Baal HaTurim, didn't make up any ideas and then prove it with Gematria. He took ideas that were already part of Jewish tradition, and they are reinforced by the fact that they have numerical values are the same. But what's important about that is Gematrias are not something that we can make up.
So they're not supposed to be self-standing.
Correct. They're not self-standing. There is a tradition, there is a divine teaching, and that divine teaching is reinforced from the fact that it. But when I was younger, right when the computers were first coming out with like the whole Torah on the computer, and I got this Gematria program. I remember I was like 14 or 15. I put in my last name. Oh, it's the same Gematria as Kadosh, which means holy, and this, and I ignored all the not nice words, right? Because it scanned the Torah for anything else that had your numeric. That's silly. It makes for a good speech if ever ever have to present at a bar and bar mitzvah and you want to have a good speech. Use one of these programs and you can say your name has the same numerical. That's not that we can make up, because it's, as you said, it's not self-standing, but rather it is supporting, reinforcing an idea. And it makes sense that there was so much of the oral tradition that was given, so therefore it made sense that there would be something that helped reinforce the idea. That is level 1 of understanding the Gematria. And we'll finish with level 2, the deeper dimension. And the deeper dimension is, as we've discussed here before, that in Judaism, Hebrew or biblical Hebrew is not random. The letters that make up a word are not random. In English, this is a table and this is a chair. Why is that? Is that Latin? Where does it come from originally? Table and chair. And where did that come from? I don't know, but at some point in time, some folks sat down and they made that decision. And had they decided this should be a chair and this should be a table, guess what? Life would have gone on. Life would have been, okay. In Hebrew, it doesn't work that way. In Hebrew, we know that the letters of something are meaningful The letters are energy. It says God used the letters of the alphabet to create the world. Almost think of it as a spiritual periodic table. And therefore, there are numbers of energies in letters. This is mystical. And we have to finish now, and there is a little bit more about this, but I'll just say it in a 1 minute version. The Cliff Note version here is there are energies in something. So when we say that the God's name is 26, that's not just random. It's that there are amounts of energies that go into each letter of the alphabet. And therefore, the fact that two things share the amount of energies may, and I say may, but not certainly, have meaning. It may mean that they have similarities. It doesn't for sure mean that. Why not? Because they could be very different energies. They still could be different energies. So, identical gematria inform us that two objects have the same amount of energies in their light and life force. But it does not inform us that the nature of the energies of one word necessarily have a connection to the energies of the other word. Only when we already know through a teaching that there's a correlation between these ideas, then can we say, guess what? It's similar ideas. They also have the same energies. The words are also the same. And therefore, it's not up to every person to make up a gematria. But when we do hear a gematria that was passed down all the way back, we don't have to laugh at it or scoff at it. It means that it was a divine teaching, and this is reinforcing it. And Kabbalistically, it means that there is a spiritual correlation between these ideas. And I'll finish with the idea that the person who wrote this book, the Baal HaTurim, did it incredibly fast. His main work was something else. And someone asked him once, why do you not have a book on the Chumash, the Torah? He only read on Jewish law and halakha. And he wrote this book incredibly fast on all these things. No computers back then, no calculators. His level of divine inspiration was such that he knew these ideas had a connection. He wasn't like trying to create anything. He knew these ideas had it, and it was just a matter of putting it down, and and that is our attitude and approach to gematria. It comes down, but it's not something that we work upwards. So either it's a handle on an existing truth, or it shows that two ideas have a similar spiritual source. We'll hold it over there.
But there, Rabbi,
Yes.
there is one thing that we all should know about those numerology.
Please.
That everybody in that room knows. And somebody in that room is probably wearing it on a necklace around their neck.
There we go.
And it's spelled backwards, though.
Chai.
Because Chet Yud is not 18. Yud Chet is 18.
That's interesting. Yeah, why is it? Yeah. But when you add up all the letters together, it's
Yeah.
18. Thank you, Amnon.
Yeah.
So, right, it's not a new idea. Every Jew, that's interesting, knows about Chai, and Chai being 18. That's very interesting. That's a good way. So, this is a little background.
But Gematria doesn't care about the order of letters.
Correct. Gematria does not care about the order of letters because it's like the general.
Yeah.
I don't understand the Moses with adultery thing.
And let's just finish the online. Thank you everyone for joining us. God willing, we will be back same time, same place next week for another class, and a special thanks to Nissan Communications for making this available every single week. Have a great week.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. Our weekly lineup of call-in programs includes Computers 2K Now with Amnon Nissan, My Life, My Will with Gisela DiCarlo, The Tanya Love Show, Health Then with Debbie Bruck, Breaking Free with Marilyn Shannon, Triangle Be Well with Howard Jacobson, Lunch and Learn with Rabbi Yisrael Cutler, Lessons of Vietnam with NCVVI members, Current Affairs with Amnon Nissan. And if you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section on nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Atomos.com, makers of quality video recorders and converters, CarolinaApparel.com, and DeltaForce.net.